We have an issue, let's get an app. We have an issue, here's a mindfulness course. We have an issue, Band-Aid, 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 Band-Aid. When you use an approach to development and addressing these people-oriented issues that is more rooted in psychology and cognitive and emotional science, they take longer, but then you're setting up the infrastructure in your people systems that then you don't have to keep hiring me forever.
Hello and welcome. We're so glad you're tuning into the Taking Good Care show. I'm Dr. Andrew Wong, based in Toronto, Canada.
And I'm Dr. David St. Arnaud, based in Edmonton, Canada. We're two practicing psychologists with over a decade of experience each, working in a variety of settings and supporting diverse populations.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. While we're both practicing psychologists, our podcast is intended purely for educational and entertainment purposes. It's not a substitute for professional mental health care or treatment. If you're in need of support, we strongly encourage you to reach out to a licensed mental health professional in your area. Good morning, everyone. It's another episode of Taking Good Care. Really excited today because I think Dave and I are going to be pushed out of our comfort zone. We have a guest, Dr. Tatijana Busic, and she is here to talk to us about organizational and clinical psychology and how the two go together. So Dr. Tatijana Busic is a licensed organizational and clinical psychologist with nearly 2 decades of experience. She has dedicated her career to enhancing resilience and emotional intelligence in people, both personally and professionally. Her organizational work focuses on developing values-driven and purpose-driven cultures by transforming leadership from the inside out. She also provides trauma-informed psychological services to individuals and couples with a mission to help people heal and thrive through difficult experiences. Dr. Busic holds a PhD from the University of Toronto, where she spent a decade researching the career development experiences of immigrant professionals in Canada. She is a published author in the field and have extended this body of research to various media outlets such as the Harvard Business Review. She currently runs leadership and team workshops, coaching programs, and consultative services in Toronto. And you can always find Dr. Busic at tatijanabusic.com. That's TATIJANABUSIC.com. On Instagram at busic.psychology.consulting. LinkedIn at busic-psychology-consulting, and on Facebook at busic.psychology.consulting. So welcome, Dr. Tatijana Busic.
Good morning. Hi.
Hello. I'm gonna jump right in because I'm listening to all this, and I know a lot of our listeners are not psychologists. So for the folks out there that kind of know what a psychologist is, can you explain the difference between organizational or clinical psychology, or just even give the listeners a heads up in terms of your area of practice or your training that you went through, and as much or as little as you want.
So industrial organizational psychology is the formal title of IO psychology, and it's really about understanding people at work, how they think, how they feel, and how they behave. And probably most importantly, how we show up to work together. How do we collaborate? How do we navigate conflict? How do we devise solutions to complex problems? How do we work with diversity in ways that are adaptive and facilitate innovation, creativity, all that good stuff. So it's also really, I think, at the heart of it about understanding how to improve individual and collective well-being. We have these things called teams. We got to show up every day and work with each other. But it's also about organizational effectiveness. How do we meet our responsibilities, performance metrics, things like that? So some responsibilities of an IO psychologist would be leadership assessment, development work, team dynamics, communication, culture, improving culture, managing change. Change management's a big one. Various assessments, as well as addressing stress, burnout, etc. So it's all about people at work. That's IO psychology. Clinical psychology, which is what my PhD in applied psychology and human development was in, is around understanding cognitive science, emotional science, physiology, human behavior, behavioral science, social science. We're trained to assess and diagnose and treat psychological issues. That's probably, how most of us would define it, and then a whole bunch of other stuff. So in the clinical world, I work mainly, I'm a trauma-informed, trauma-trained person. I work with couples and individuals. In the IO world, I work with leaders and teams.
So as you work with leaders, Tatiana, are you seeing a certain trend in terms of well-being, and how does that even transcend to the way someone might lead? Because like what I'm hearing in terms of that clinical and IO world, you can work through the mental health piece, but then you do so much work with leaders as well. How do the two sort of marry together?
I think of psychology as where there are people, there is psychology. And psychology is everywhere, all the time, and it infiltrates into every single aspect of the systems that we rely on personally and professionally. So with the clinical piece, mental illness disorders is a different area under the clinical psychology umbrella. Then there's wellness. We could, live life relatively, even very productively without meeting criteria for mental illness, but know that we're not well in how we're sleeping, how we're feeling, the quality of our relationships, that kind of stuff. So back to the question of wellness in organizations, I think that there's a big continuum here. Sometimes we're seeing clinical diagnoses of burnout and stress-related disorders in leaders for sure. And other times it's around, leaders coming to me and saying, I'm doing a great job. I'm doing my job, but somehow I just don't care. What is this about? And so wellness, that is a very big category with a tremendous amount of variation of what that looks like for people and how that is presented for people.
It springs to mind. Years ago, I was reading the Harvard Business Review. Don't ask me why, but I was reading it, and I remember there was one particular article on leaders and management, and how there's been a shift in probably the last maybe 10, 15 years to have more focus on EQ, so emotional intelligence, rather than IQ, and the ability to lead through understanding others' perspectives, emotions, rather than just thinking competence and you have to be able to perform and meet these numbers.
Absolutely. So you can think of IQ almost as like you need to have the, in quotation marks, hard skill to get through the door. If you don't have the training in this and the competence, well, you're not going to get the job. That's part one. Then we have part two, EQ, which is around how do we work with this thing called human emotion, which is everywhere. A little fact that I really like to refer to is around the human brain and its processing style and processing power. Every second, the human brain is processing something like 80 million bits of information per second. And there's, some disagreement around is it 70 or 80%, but it's somewhere around there. Between 70 and 80% of that data is instinctual, emotional, outside of conscious awareness. In other words, it's not your IQ. It's this whole other world called emotion, instinct, right hemisphere orientation. So EQ isn't about being emotional. It's about understanding how to work with the power of emotional data, which really is governing us and motivating us. It's our superpower.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I heard a phrase the other day, and I don't quote me on it, but it was like emotions drive our behavior and our intellect like explains it after, right? So often we're rationalizing what we've done, but the actual cause of it is emotional. And if we don't understand that, then we're missing like a big piece of why we do what we do.
Yeah.
It's so relevant to, I think, in almost every aspect of our daily life. Like anyone who works, whether you run your own practice or you work for a corporation, you're going to be met with a leader somewhere. And so if, let's say, a leader You mentioned burnout, Tatiana. Let's say a leader is feeling stressed or perhaps bits and pieces of burnout. How do they manage that in the teams? Because leaders are expected to do so much nowadays. Manage a team, care for well-being, speak on social issues and so on. How does that play out in sort of the practical world as they're trying to lead teams?
I think that that's a very relevant and really poignant, important question, especially in today's day and age, that I don't think we've answered. We don't know. We're not addressing that. Leadership responsibility has not changed. It's changed, but it's grown. We keep adding more to the list, but not taking anything away from that list of responsibilities. So now you're tasked with navigating, political issues. You're tasked with navigating the impact of climate change. You're tasked with, social justice issues. You're tasked with all of this really important stuff. But how do you manage as an individual leader, not just change, but the acceleration of the speed of change in which you are now expected to deal with on a daily basis? This is something that, without sounding alarmist, because I'm extremely hopeful and optimistic and I see the possibility. However, this is very concerning in our organizations today. We're not addressing it.
I want to take a step back because I want to go back even to your definition of organizational psychologist. And my understanding was that it's applying psychology to the workforce, right? But very few organizations or companies or places that I think the listeners are working have a psychologist come in, right? And so I almost feel like this is an underutilized resource. And we hear a lot about like toxic work environments and, even the men's group that I run, guys will come in and they'll say like, it is toxic. It is harmful at my place of work, but there's no psychologist involved, right?
Yeah.
So how do you explain that?
One thought that comes to my mind is kind of this slightly obsessional culture over the quick fix and speed. We have an issue, let's get an app. We have an issue, here's a mindfulness course once a year. We have an issue, Band-Aid, 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 Band-Aid. And I love apps and mindfulness courses and, those one-off amazing workshops and seminars, all great nuggets of information for sure, and we need them, but they stay on the surface. And when you use an approach to development and addressing these people-oriented issues that is more rooted in kind of psychology and cognitive and emotional and neuroscience, they take longer. There's more investment initially, but then you're setting up the infrastructure in your people systems that then you don't have to keep hiring me forever. Hire me to do deep, good work for a year or two, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. And then we do it. And now you've embedded this into the fabric of the systems that are governing and you don't need me. So I think it's deeper work and understanding that quick fixes, there are no hacks. Sorry, there just are no hacks. It works temporarily, but it doesn't work long term.
Well, and as you're talking, there's almost like a part two to my question, because what I've seen organizations do is they'll bring in like an EAP program, an employee assistance program, and they'll send employees out to talk to someone, right? If they need support. But I'm guessing, or I'm assuming that your role would be like looking at the system, looking at the entire organization, at least with like change management and stuff like that, where you're looking at the influence or maybe the impact of the way the system or the organization is organized and how management is managing staff, rather than just helping the individual cope with feeling burnt out or depressed or.
Yeah. Maybe one way to look at it is it's an individual and a collective issue. We have to look at both. Human beings, we are so interesting this way. We are so individualistic. Like no one in the world is exactly the same as me. Never has been, there never will be. I am Tatijana. You are David, you are Andrew, and we are so individual in terms of that experience. But at the same time, we're also completely collective and driven, and more than driven, like we need for survival, for all the good stuff. In evolution, we got to work together, and we're all so similar as a human being and how we kind of have these things called brains and hearts and emotions and physiologies and blah, blah, blah. So I think that maybe historically there's been this arbitrary kind of made up divide between like, oh, personal, it's your personal issue. Go get some therapy. And sure, sometimes it is a personal issue. And well, there's always a personal component to it. There's the individual, but that individual is working within a context. You have to appreciate both to understand the whole thing.
Do you find, Tatiana, in your work and having worked with leaders, managers, directors, and so on, that this whole idea, this definition of being a leader has evolved over time? Because even as we're using this word leadership or leader just throughout our conversation so far, I get the image of somebody who is supposed to be strong, who is supposed to lead that team, be the captain, and move forward, take everybody with you, and that's your responsibility. You're accountable. And I don't know if that definition has changed over time, where, do leaders still work a lot of the time in a silo? Are they open to asking for help when they need help? I'm sure it's very individualistic depending on the personality style, leadership style, but if you come across somebody who really takes that leadership role seriously, as you should, does that impact their mental health? Right? Like if you think, wow, this weight is on my shoulders. And on top of that, it's not just work. Like I'm sure people have family lives, personal lives that they have to deal with too. Like I can only imagine how much weight there must be.
Yeah. I wonder if there's some work that needs to be done around how we're defining strength. And I suspect, and I really actually believe that we've got some really gross, as in massive, misconceptions of how we're defining strength. And strength being rooted in this kind of stoic, I have the answer to everything. You lean on me. I don't need anything. I am not vulnerable. I sound like a robot right now as I'm saying this. That wasn't on purpose. That was just rolled off my tongue that way. Almost this understanding of strength in this robotic, mechanistic, very dehumanizing way. Where what if strength means having the answers and not having the answers? What if it means resilience and also sometimes and vulnerability? What if strength is around knowing how to navigate yourself as a leader on this diverse continuum of thing called your experience? So something around, you see this especially, then we can go a little deeper into the psychology of men or male identified individuals who hold leadership positions. That's this idea of strength is almost on steroids, where I have to have the answer to everything all the time and not show any of my vulnerability or fear or overwhelm, or that, dare I say, I need something, which is a real problem. So going back to your question, redefining, debunking, demystifying, expanding our actual knowledge around what strength means as a human being.
And what it means to be a leader.
Yeah.
And also what weaknesses, right? Like if you're trying to hide weakness, like what is that weakness and how does that show up and what does that look like when you're in a leadership position?
For sure. I remember a little story when I finished my PhD and I had to register for licensing with the College of Psychologists. And one of my secondary supervisors, who was an industrial organizational psychologist, super well-known guy. He's like one of the, originals of that field, super well regarded. He said to me, "You're ready, Tatijana." And I said, "What do you mean I'm ready?" How do you know I'm ready? I need to learn more stuff. He's like, you're ready because of this. There's a whole bunch of things a whole bunch of other reasons, but the top most indicator of your readiness is you are aware of your limitations. That is key to professionalism. We can't do everything and know everything. It's impossible. And that's dangerous. And so a good, responsible, strong leader is someone who knows what their strengths are and their limitations. And then they'll get the people around them to fill in those gaps.
So, Tatiana, your clientele then, like let's say somebody walks into your office and perhaps because of the work you do, you will get individuals who are in leadership positions who are coming asking for your help. They want help with perhaps their mental health or, something's just not working in the workplace as a leader, as an executive. Are these individuals do they already have that acknowledgement, that recognition that they're struggling and so they need to be more vulnerable? Or, is it something that you will routinely work on with the clients who come through your door?
I don't know. There's probably like a tremendous range of awareness, and awareness of what that varies. People know that something is missing, something is wrong, or something feels dead, or there's something, but I can't put my finger on it. I
I
love it
got
when
chills down my spine. I got chills down my spine when you said dead. Like something's
dead.
dead. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't worked like in organizations, but when I see some leaders that come through my office for individual, it sometimes is I'm drinking too much, right? Or I'm working too much and like there's something off, but they're not sure what's going on. And in some ways they're highly successful and they're getting a lot of praise for what they're doing. So I guess I'm curious again too, how much you're actually working with like individual leaders or how much you're working with, say, organizations. How many times are you sought out by an organization or by a leader for individual support?
I would say that this is a bit of an organic evolution for me in my practice, but I work with the individual, usually at the executive level, reporting to somewhere around the C-suite area. And then I work with that one individual. We start with cultivating a space that is really, truly 100% privacy compliant. I don't write reports based on our work updates to their boss, whether it's the CEO of an organization or whoever the boss is. I craft an agreement between their boss and the individual where I can create a space in which we can really explore. And then to cultivate that true safety. I'm not using the word safety lightly. Safety is a word that's being overused, misused all over the place on Instagram. Oh my goodness, it's almost like frustrating. But like true safety. And I take the time to cultivate that space in which I earn their trust. I earn their regard for us to go deep, to understand what is coming up for you as the executive director when you are presenting to that board that really pushes your threat button. Sometimes it's childhood, sometimes it's what happened last year, sometimes it's all these things, but we got to process that. Once we do part one of the personal stuff, then we go to part two. Let's work with you and your boss now, and you and the board, or you and your team. And that's when I'll move into some of the organizational work. But I tend to begin with the individual leader. I don't know why, but that's how it's evolved.
But will the organization put a time limit or period in which you can do this work? And look, if 3 months go by and
Yeah.
you're telling us that person's not making any progress, well, we're gonna have to take some action on our end.
Yeah, absolutely. So while the privacy is key to that first stage of work together,
Yeah.
I'm still accountable to measuring progress to the organization because the company is paying for this service. And at the end of the day, this is about helping the individual lead better. And
Okay.
so we do have to have measurement metrics present, and if we're not seeing change, we're not going to change the world in 2 months, but if we're not seeing some kind of shift within 8 to 12 sessions, then I've got to look at the work that I'm doing. That's my responsibility, and then we'll address that.
Do you ever come in when there's like concerns? Like, so there's been maybe like a grievance filed with a union, or there's employees that are making reports that the leadership is not treating them appropriately, and then you're coming in to kind of rectify that, or is that I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. My preference is just an individual style kind of thing in terms of the work that I like to do. I don't know if I've told you guys this, but I'm motivated by a couple of things. One is it has to be good work, hard work, and I have to have a good time. If I'm not going to have a good time, I tend to not want the work. I realize that's a very privileged kind of position to be in, and I'm grateful for that. But I like to, my preference is to, if it's about one individual leader that the reports are about, I want to work with that individual. That's my preference, because that's where I can really kind of get into, the heart of where some of these issues are stemming from.
I love that you just said that, like, and I can see it, like the listeners can't see it, but your passion. And I know you said it's a bit of a privileged position, but I actually think it's about an ethical position, that if you're working in an area that you hate or don't like or don't enjoy, you're not going to do very good work. So I can just see that you found your niche, you found something that you're passionate about and you love doing, and then you stick to that.
I appreciate that feedback. It's aligned. There is an ethics around this.
Yeah.
I mean, we're paid to do a job. And again, going back to recognizing your limitations, this might be a limitation. If I'm not having fun, I'm not going to do a great job, or a job as good as it can be, at least. Yeah.
Well, I think that also goes with your introduction, like the mingling of clinical psychology and organizational psychology, right? You want to work with the individual, but at the
Yes.
same time, that work benefits the organization, the company, the corporation, whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in terms of that piece around working with leaders, now you might come across leaders. We talked about IQ and EQ at the beginning, and I'm assuming there are a lot of companies that will still hire based on someone's competence, their ability to get through tasks, to be sharp in problem solving. And so they may be very intellectually sharp, but then those who might be sort of maybe not as strong with the EQ, even though now they've been given this position, given their competence, given their track record, and now they're really struggling perhaps with leading a team. Can you give us a bit of a flavor of how you might work with that individual to strengthen their EQ in order to lead and be more productive, or maybe even gain the respect of their team members?
So someone is, maybe more, I am rational, I am not emotional driven. What's this
Hmm.
business about? Fine. Helping them understand, almost using I worked a lot with engineering organizations, and there's an engineering to this. This is the hard science. It's not the soft. And so helping the individual understand, I'm not coming in with a fluffy unicorn therapy hat on, understand the hard science, the engineering of this, and what the return is to you as an individual. If you hone the capability to work with your own emotion and others' emotion, this is what it can bring you. Do you want it? Probably. And again, it's not a one language fits all. There's human diversity here. There's a lot of the culture of the individual person. You do not have to become some rainbow fluff unicorn to be emotionally competent. You can even be like a little bit of a flat affect, shy, introverted, all kinds of things that we wouldn't associate. Maybe like there's some biases here around, what an emotionally intelligent leader looks like. This is about finding your voice, your style, and how you work with this aspect of the data in your organization. So, really helping them understand, maybe through things like motivational interviewing, a lot of questioning and curiosity and reflection on how this ultimately benefits them. Never mind your team. You're going to feel better and more competent.
I guess a very straightforward question as a follow-up. Do you get a lot of pushback?
When I finished my PhD 7 years ago, and then it took me a couple years to license in these licenses. And so it's been about 5, 6 years that I've been working in the consulting space more formally and more full time. And in the beginning, I was like, I'm going to create a pitch deck and I'm going to sell this to you. And then I was like, what am I doing? I don't like how I feel. This is not what I want to do. I made a conscious decision. I am not selling anything to anyone. I'm going to provide you with my analyses of the risks associated with doing nothing or ignoring psychology, the benefits. I'm going to step into my role as a professional, and this is the competence that I have. I'll present it to you. You do whatever you want. I'm right over here. But I'm not in the business of talking you into it. And often through those direct conversations, people get talked into it. Because they're like, oh, okay, those are the risks. That's what history, that's what, the data, the literature, all the studies that have been conducted, this is what experience tells us. Yeah.
There's honesty, and like you said, there's no fluff. Like, I'm just going to tell you what we're going to do. Do you want it or not?
There's such power in being direct, and being direct has nothing to do with being disrespectful. It's very honest, very respectful, because then the individual you're speaking to knows exactly where you stand, and that's trust building. So, yeah, I don't like talking people into anything, basically.
I'm with you on that. I have a kind of a rule, don't work harder than the client, right? So if I'm like trying to convince them that they need to do something, like, no, let's find out what their motivation is. Like you said, like motivational interviewing and really understanding that they're interested in making a change or not. Like you said, what are the risks of just staying the same? So I find that's easier working with a private paying client who's already invested. But I'm wondering in terms of like an organization that hires you to come in and work with their CEO or their manager, and the manager or the CEO hasn't really looked and found you. How does that work in terms of you just introducing yourself and telling them, what you're doing and how this might benefit them?
Well, kind of going back to what are the parameters that we need to establish true privacy and safety in this relationship. So very transparent. Again, I have two clients here. I have your boss as my client because they're the ones signing off the check. And then I have you, and you're both equally important. And this is what I'm delivering to the organization. This is what I'm delivering to you. And it's like really a transparent informing, that's ongoing. And so through that process, I think that we cultivate trust. And you're not just going to trust me because I'm like some doctor lady. You're going to trust me because of the relationship that we build together. And I also have this competent stuff over here. So I have to earn that, and I'll take the time to do that. And I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. Then I don't even want to be for everybody. And if I'm not, then let's understand why, what, how, and I'll work with you to find someone who may be the right person for you. But back to that earning of trust and that being a really alive process. You're not just going to give it to me because your boss, wants you to do this. Then we're going to do kind of shallow level work. And again, that doesn't meet my needs of having fun. Yeah. I'm being a bit cheeky here, but you know what I mean.
I think I'm getting a good sense of it, and I resonate a lot with what you're saying. Actually, I was biking in this morning thinking about this stuff and thinking about our conversation and just even my own, my own role as a leader and what kind of support might be needed. And I think it was in your bio or somewhere that I read that like almost I got the sense this happens from the inside out, right? And you find it fun to kind of look on the inside and find out kind of internally what is going on for you. And then how does that kind of reflect how you are treating other people around you or leading in your role?
The relationship between your first and foremost relationship is the one within you. Whether we're talking about whatever role in your life, leader, parent, friend, neighbor, gardener, whatever, it's you within you. And so before I step out and try to manage my team better, improve motivation, be a better parent, whatever the thing is, I can't bypass, or I'm encouraging more of this kind of thinking as a psychologist among all people. Don't bypass the work within the self, because that work is foundational and has such power and ripple effects into everything else. And so let's start with you. And then we move to system 2, the world outside you. Then we move to system 3, your organization, your family structure, and the systems are now expanding around you. But that core is you. I'm really understanding through this conversation just how much I love the individual work, like the nucleus, the heart. Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like to me, Tatiana, like it's more than just the surface level work where, a lot of the time, even in media, right? Like we talk about like awareness, raising awareness.
Yeah.
Right? But this is more than just raising awareness for that person who you're working with. It's going deeper in the layers of the individual to what Dave said before, the inside out. But we have to be able to go deeper, right? In order for that impact to be made.
Yeah. And that could sometimes, I don't know if either of you have ever had clients who, everyone's like yoga, meditation, go meditate, go do yoga. Great. These are ancient sciences that have so much wisdom and power, but silence and turning the attention inward can be really overwhelming to a lot of people, that it becomes quiet. Mm-hmm. And now my attention is going inward, and I'm tasked with how I'm actually thinking and feeling on the inside. And that can be overwhelming to people. So it's important. This is where the clinical psychology piece comes in. Mm-hmm. Doing this work in a way that really respects where that individual is at, because we have to build the tolerance for the discomfort in that kind of development work.
So Tatiana, broadly speaking then, how hard is it for leaders to slow down? Because in order to, I would think that, leadership positions, and again, this is a very general view and maybe stereotypical view, but I'm assuming that leadership positions are often attractive to what we think of as like the type A personalities, right? Like you're the go-getter. It's hard for you to slow down. You have to be always thinking, doing, leading. So when you talk about like the power of meditation, the power of yoga, like we're asking somebody to possibly do the direct opposite of what they're used to. How hard is that?
It's very difficult, but not difficult because it needs to be difficult or is difficult in some kind of like the cosmic divine has come and said, this is difficult. And no, you were born knowing how to do this. You were born knowing how to be present. You were born mindful. You were born breathing into your diaphragm. You were born with all of these. So it's not about becoming something that you're not, but almost rekindling your connection with the biological component of the self. You know how to do this, but we've lost touch with it. And this is maybe a different conversation because of the world in which we're living in and what's being valued and what's being dismissed or devalued. And so I would argue that while this busyness is being identified and rewarded as like productivity. It's not. It's pseudo productivity at best. At worst, it's a whole bunch of other things. Slowing down is exactly what we need in this 21st century world to speed up. Unless the building is on fire, you do not literally, you do not need to move fast in any crisis. So it's interesting. There's a really kind of almost like the law of how biology works.
Mm.
And this isn't about being more mindful and like be like Chandler with yourself. And I use my voice changes because people are like, oh, you're just a nice psychologist. I'm like, no, this is like hard biologically driven stuff. You are designed to do this. And you guys have probably heard of Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, like how many decades ago? We're talking about this. We have our fast systems in the brain and we have our slow systems in the brain. We need to know how to work with both of them. But right now, we're living in this world that is obsessed with the fast. And that's nervous system overdrive. That's anxiety. That's functioning in survival mode all the time. That's not about productivity.
How do you do that work though, then? Like when you've got an organization that just wants to go faster, wants to grow bigger, and yet here we are trying to help someone slow down. And so you've got this organization that may not know what you're doing with the leader, in
Yeah.
terms of your client and trying to help them slow down and speed up. And at the same time, you've got this organization here who's like, come on, help us grow, help us go faster, help our revenue.
Well, I'd have to spend, time really understanding what that growth means and looks like and how they're defining this,
Yeah,
and then mapping how slow thinking. When I say slow thinking, I'm talking about not making decisions based from fear.
right.
Fast thinking. And fast thinking from a neuro kind of scientific perspective is not conducive to quality decision making. Do you want quality decision making or do you want fast decision making? Which one? You want the return on your investment. Absolutely. Everybody wants to make more. We absolutely, absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. This is not about not achieving high. This is about achieving high. In this world that is changing very fast with artificial intelligence, with access to data, we are being inundated with data at a level that really truly is unprecedented in human history. I don't love using that word. It's also was overused in pandemic times, but it really is there's no precedent for the amount of data that the individual human being, whether you're a leader or parent or whoever, is having to confront these days. So this is about helping the brain adapt to the influx of this information so that you can meet your objectives and your performance goals. Is that a good sell? Did I just sell you guys?
My head's nodding, so I think I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've drank the
Sorry,
Kool-Aid.
Dave. I stole your question before, Dave, so
Oh,
I'll let you go.
well, now I got about 10 questions, so I don't even know which one to pick. When you were talking about that, I think about like sustainability, and this is, so yes, you want this and you want this right now. But if we go at it in this way, this is not sustainable. It's not sustainable within the individual, like the pace you're talking about, that faster and faster pace. At some point we break down and organizations break down or individuals break down, and that could look like burnout, or that can look like, you know, high turnover in your hiring. And so maybe that wasn't a question. I was just like thoughts going through my head. My actual question way back, if we go back a little bit, was around consent. And you were talking about, we have to go inside, and all of us like nerdy psychologists are going like, yeah, 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 go for, what's happening on the inside. And we love this stuff. But sometimes people aren't interested in doing that, right? And we need to explain to them kind of why we might be doing this. And, sometimes it's intimidating to meet with a psychologist that might see something that you're not aware of in yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious about that in terms of these executives that might be quite self-aware and intelligent, but also quite afraid that you might go somewhere they're not interested in going. And is that familiar? Is that something that happens? I'm curious.
The individual is the agent of themselves. Just because I know how to listen really well and I know how to ask, I hope, good questions that go deeper and deeper in terms of painting a picture of you, doesn't mean that I'm in any way a master over you. You are the agent in yourself. Anything that I might see, chances are you already know. And your foot is on the gas pedal and the brake in this work. You are in power and control. I have no interest in powering over anyone and telling you, you really need to look at your childhood trauma. No, thank you. I don't want that responsibility, nor do I think I'm special enough. There's a humility, I think, as a psychologist, in my view, to be a good one, a humility and an awareness of not doing that and helping people understand sometimes we need to go deep in this way, sometimes deep in this way. I'm gonna like share with you my reflections. I'm like a mirror. I'm gonna mirror, but you are in control here. And that is like respecting the autonomy of the person. So I will follow. We still have to deal with the stuff that's going on at work though. And so how do we do that? Let's like name this thing and we don't have to go la la la. And so I think that the going in deep looks different for different people. And so they're going to help me map out. This is the collaboration between the two.
On a systems level, Tatiana, I don't know that many organizational psychologists. And I'm just curious, based on the work that you do, being a voice in that particular field, I'm just thinking there must be so much more work that organizations can do with psychology and psychologists like yourself. And I don't know how many organizations actually access somebody like you to go in and help and provide the service for their staff and their leaders.
Yeah. This is why, podcasts like this, initiatives like what the two of you are doing is really important. There is, I think some educating, some coming out in quotation marks of our profession that needs to happen because people just don't know. And they equate a psychologist with like, oh, I have to meet the clinical criteria for depression I'm like sick. I'm on, something's really wrong. Well, no, it's around, you can hire a psychologist to help with your innovation lab. How do we how do we spark creativity? So I think a part of it is our responsibility too. We have to come out more and like talk more and be on public platforms and not be so shy as a profession and so like academic. So like we're kind of a perfectionistic. I mean, you kind of have to be to get a PhD probably in any discipline. But it's, I think, a part of our responsibility to speak up more and to come out and to liaison and network and attend different events and speak to other industries and professionals for that conversation to start happening. But I have seen a new role there's a chief psychology officer. I've seen that, which I was like, what? You can be a C-suite psychology in one of the 5 big consulting firms. I saw that. It is interesting. But then I looked at the credentials of not that you have to have a PhD in psychology to know psychology, no. But it was more MBA kind of, it was not a psychologist. It was more, so anyway, that's another conversation. But just even seeing a chief psychology officer in an organization, I'm like, that speaks volumes in terms of the possibilities.
Yes. Now they just need to know that there are psychologists who do work in that field as well.
Yes. Maybe that'll be your next podcast. And we'll broadcast it to like all the big banks.
Actually, I'm just mindful of time, and I wanted to maybe throw this out there. And again, I don't know how much you want to speak to this, but when I think about leaders and development and like the conferences that go on, a lot of it is like coaching and like executive coaching, and you're coming in with a different expertise, and I'm curious about how you explain that to people. Like, why don't I just get a coach? Why would I want a psychologist?
Well, I wonder if I just don't want to come across like I'm putting down any other profession because there's a place for all of these different service providers, and psychologists really are another form of professional service provider. So sometimes coaching is the right thing. Performance coaching is the right thing. And I respect all of that. But I guess where I would come in is it's really process and experientially driven. And so my model of change, how I understand individual change processes is process and experiential driven. And what that means is we're not going to kind of I don't know, it's not out, the outcome's going to happen through going deeper and understanding how your cognition, your emotion, your nervous system, how do you speak to your nervous system? Sometimes that's what I sound like. Basically, like what I do is like teach you and help you how to work with your nervous system adaptively. People are like, what does that mean? And I was like, well, your nervous system is your key communication system. It's in charge of everything. And yet we don't understand, many of us don't know how to read it, how to communicate with it. So these are some of the snippets of information that I might throw out there depending on the person.
Yeah.
But it's like working with the whole system versus this one, maybe just that's I guess what comes to my mind.
Well, and you're also part of a regulated body, right? Like you're a registered psychologist in Ontario that has certain standards of practice. And, some of that might not always be great, but it also anyone who meets with a psychologist can look up what are the requirements to become one. And I find like I've been looking into executive coaching as well, just being interested in that area. And one of the advantages of it that's been touted is that there's less regulation, right? And so I'm going, with less regulation, yes, there's more flexibility and more freedom to do what you want, but when you are looking for help, right, it might be harder to find the help that you want because it's a broader field out there. Like, what does coaching actually look like? So I don't know, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but that's been my kind of journey looking into the difference between executive coaching and being a psychologist and helping executives.
What I get, I've had a lot of people in the coaching profession, or even organizational psychologists, who've asked me clinical questions. How do you know when to stop? Because now we're stepping into the realm of trauma. We're stepping into the realm of, clinical psychology. And I guess that's where I could come in, where, where that is rare. That is more of a rare competence. And if there is stuff around childhood trauma that's impacting your leadership or your parenting now, et cetera, I have the competence to kind of identify that and to help you figure out what you need to do to figure that out. Where one of the risks in some of the deregulated development professions is people will go to places where they should not. And that could be tricky if it's for treatment purposes.
That could be harmful, right?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm being very polite right now. I'm being very polite right now.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely very harmful. And I'm sure both of you as clinical psychologists have run into that before in your practices where people are like, oh, I got trauma treatment. Who? What? What did you do? Oh my goodness. Like, it can be dangerous.
How do you manage, Tatiana? Like, we talked about sort of workplace toxicity, and let's say you're working with somebody and they tell you that, there's this very toxic workplace that they're in. And again, going back to this idea that, you're there for the organization and you're there for the client, the individual client. And let's say they're telling you things that, can perhaps create some sort of trauma for the individual being in that workplace. How do you manage that? For me, it sort of seems like an internal conflict, a dilemma of sorts. Like, how do you manage that?
Well, it may be that it's maybe the right thing to do is to end the employment or seek other employment, et cetera. Sometimes we just need to end a relationship because it's over.
Mm.
If there is no possibility for change or recovery or healing, then that might be the right option. I don't know. But whatever the right option is for you, we'll figure that out through helping regulate the impact of this toxic environment on you now. So I think back to, one thing, this is in Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist in the, who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, a whole bunch of other stuff on his experiences in concentration camps during the Second World War. That one thing that no matter what the trauma was around him, and the man experienced unimaginable suffering, one thing that no one could ever take away from him was his ability to choose how to respond. And so we have power. We always have power, no matter what is going on around us, to look at the impact of the toxicity on us internally and create, what we call in intrapersonal boundaries within myself, so that I can, protect myself in a way that isn't hyped up, hyper vigilance, and anxiety, like stressy stuff, but in a way that I can ground no matter what you do. It's regaining control in chaos, in toxicity. And that is empowering. You may still have to leave the organization. You might still have to report your boss. You might still have to do all this other really difficult stuff. But we need to begin there, because that's going to give you the clarity that you need to make the decision on what the right next step is for you. So let's start there and see what happens.
So interesting. Actually, Dave and I have a episode on boundaries, and this is exactly what Dave was saying, actually, as one of his points. Like, at what point do you say, you know what, it's not worth it anymore, I gotta walk away?
Okay, this is more of an analogy or an observation. So I worked in the oil field throughout my entire university. So I was a laborer, and then I was like running heavy equipment, and I got to see different foremans come through, and like, just from, a layman, I'm an employee, I'm just here doing my job, making money so I can go back to university. But I got to see different leadership styles. And I still reflect on this on a regular basis. Like, I remember one foreman that was really good at getting a lot out of his employees. Like, the production was really high, but the employees hated him. Everyone was afraid of him, right? And where the cost came to the company was they wouldn't grease their machines. They wouldn't maintain the equipment that costs like thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Because they hated their foreman, right? And then this other guy comes around. He doesn't get the same, like, and sorry, this is guys, because it's typically guys in these positions, at least when I was there. And it would be like they all liked him and worked hard for him. Didn't have the same productivity, but I think it was more sustainable. Like, they would be able to work long term in that job without that high stress or that toxicity of being afraid that your foreman's going to drive up and ream you out for something that you didn't even know you were doing wrong, right? And I'm wishing you would have been dropped in to my place of employment and been able to explain that to the organization, because I think the organization was blind to it. I think the higher level leadership was actually, cared about the staff and cared about the employees, but this was happening kind of in the weeds of the organization. So just as I would love to pick your brain on kind of what this would look like in terms of your role as a psychologist coming into an oil field, male dominated place of employment.
It always makes me a little bit, I hear this, this is a common thing that I see in my work, where there's like really well-intentioned, like most people in the world are well-intentioned. Most people are kind and good. We mess up left, right, and center all the time. But generally, human beings kindness is there. And you see the executive table wanting well-being. And then there's that one bully executive that somehow is getting away with everything for decades. Yeah. And it's like, people, find your bravery. You don't have to fire the bully executive, but my goodness, let's like develop the competence to have a difficult conversation. Where we can respect and honor like everyone here, and these kind of individuals, the one individual that is ripple affecting into an entire culture of an organization. And then there's these secret conversations at the executive table where they're like, oh yeah, I know, well, he's just like that, she's like that, they're like that. Oh, and I'm like, why? why this endless suffering like this? And so, yeah, it's unfortunately, it always makes me a little bit sad because the employees who are the recipients of that bully leader are often like, our company doesn't care about us. Nobody really cares about us. And then these conversations are happening over here where the executive team or the board or like the people with real power are like, well, we just don't know what to do. I'm like, well, can I help you figure out what to do? There's ways of figuring out what to do that might not necessarily mean firing the bully, because I understand that the person is bringing in X millions of dollars a year, and there is a value that they are bringing to this organization for sure. But it doesn't have to be so punitive, or I don't know. It's like maybe a difficult conversation. How do you have those? It's important. Isn't this what being an adult means? Partially?
Wow. You know what this means, Tatiana? You gotta get your license and go work out in Alberta. This seems like there's a lot of need out there for
Yeah.
you.
Oh, yeah. Maybe.
I could see you like clinching your jaw because it is not a welcoming space for a lot of people. I know even just being in the field and,
Yeah.
when people knew that I was going to be a psychologist, it was
Yeah.
very interesting to see the response. But on an individual level, again, I think where you connect and where I think I really appreciate those relationships. I would
Yeah.
be meeting with someone individually who was working on my piece of equipment, and then they were like, "Oh yeah, and this happened at home or this," and I'm like, "Okay, right?" Like people are looking for connection, and they are open to being vulnerable, but not in a certain context, not in the open in a lot of these environments that are set up to be like you were talking right from the top around what does it mean to be strong? What does it mean to be weak? Like
Yeah.
yeah, how do I show up for work?
So I am mindful of time. Tatiana, Dave and I sometimes, or usually, do a little bit of, the takeaway from the episode. And so, I just want to thank you for coming on today. And one of the things I really took away is like how much more of this work we need in our world. Living in Toronto, see and work with so many individuals, even parents. Like I know I work primarily with children. But even when parents come into the office and they have their laptops with them and they're looking for a space to work, they see an empty office, they ask, "Can I work there?" And so much of our world is just in such a rush. And I loved your point about slowing down in order to speed up, right? And I think I'm gonna take that away for myself even, in terms of, consciously and intentionally slowing down, and finding ways to do that and see what that's gonna feel like. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that. I think the fast pace and the rate that things are changing is not going to slow down. So, how do we help people, or how, even reminding myself, right, to slow down because yeah, like you can still be a good leader and still put in a lot of effort. And I'm thinking more from a parenting perspective, right? Like it's just, and again, the managing from the inside out, that to me really resonates. And I think, how am I self-managing? And then how does that show up with my kids or with my staff? Or so those are the pieces that I'm taking away and that will probably be chewing on for a while.
Yeah, and if I can just, one thing that comes to mind too, this is not about perfection. It's not about always managing the self optimally and being an amazing leader and parent. No, it's about failing all the time. But maybe we recover a little faster. Maybe we own our failures or insecurities, our mistakes a little differently, in a way where we're learning and growing together from them. But it's really not about, I have to like, it's some perfectionistic standard of being, the mindful parent. Sometimes there's that stuff too, the mindful
Yeah.
present parent. I'm like, that's attachment parenting gone wrong. It was like everybody has their moments. This is
Yes.
about owning your moments and how you show up when you have your
Yes.
moment as a leader that determines whether the extent of harm that it creates or not. But it's not about never having a dark side or whatever. One of those moments. Let's just call them moments.
Oh, just another takeaway then after hearing you say that, Tatiana. Like this
I
might
just
be
had
a
to
little bit.
remind both too. It was like not about perfecting moments in mindfulness or yes.
Well, I was gonna say like this might be a bit facetious, but like you can take the work that you do and come to my office and probably work with some families I work with. Like the work you do just transcends, the organization. It goes beyond so much of that. You can work with all sorts of different populations using the same concepts, the same theories, and still do really good work. So, Tatiana, thank you again so much for coming on. This has really opened my eyes. It's a fascinating conversation. I'm sure we could go on and have other conversations around your field and your industry. So again, you can find Dr. Tatijana Busic. Her website is tatijanabusic.com, TATIJANABUSIC.com. You can find her on Instagram at busic.psychology.consulting, LinkedIn at busic-psychology-consulting, and on Facebook at busic.psychology.consulting. And I'll put all of that up in the description as well. But again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I've had a lot of fun today. And thanks for doing this podcast. It's great. Yeah. I look forward to hearing more episodes.
Well, I think you mentioned something about coming back on the podcast, so I look forward to that.
Sounds good.
Done. Take care, everyone.